Imagine fighting through the night against an opponent you cannot see clearly, an opponent who knows your every weakness. Hours of sweat, dust, and desperation. Your hip shatters, pain explodes, but still you refuse to let go. By dawn, you are limping, wounded forever, yet in that limp lies a blessing, a new name, and a destiny that will shape nations. This is Jacob, the trickster who stole his brother's birthright, the fugitive who ran for his life, the dreamer who saw heaven open above him, the lover who labored 14 years for the woman he adored, the father whose household became the seed of a nation, the man who deceived, was deceived, and then was broken, only to be remade. Jacob was not perfect. He was stubborn, flawed, often afraid. Yet through his struggle, he discovered a truth that still echoes today. God does not bless the spotless. He blesses those who cling to him and refuse to let go. Stay with me, because Jacob's journey is one of the most dramatic in all of Scripture. It begins with a birth, a prophecy, and a bowl of stew, but it ends with a limp that changes history. Jacob's life was marked before his first breath. Isaac, son of Abraham, had taken Rebekah as his wife. For 20 long years, she bore no child. In that culture, barrenness was more than grief. It was seen as a curse, a shadow over the family name. Yet Isaac prayed, persistently, earnestly, until at last the Lord opened Rebekah's womb. But pregnancy brought no peace. Inside her, the children clashed, like rivals at war. Rebekah cried out, "Why is this happening to me?" And the Lord answered with words that would shape history. "Two nations are in your womb. Two peoples shall be separated from your body. One shall be stronger than the other, and the older shall serve the younger." From the very beginning, God overturned the world's order. When the time came, the first child emerged red and covered with hair. They named him Esau, a man destined to be wild, untamed. Immediately after, his brother followed, grasping Esau's heel with a defiant grip. They named him Jacob, heel grabber, one who supplants. The struggle had already begun. As they grew, their differences became sharper. Esau became a hunter, a man of the field, impulsive, passionate, living by appetite. Jacob preferred the tents, observant, shrewd, calculating. Their father Isaac loved Esau for the food he brought. Rebekah favored Jacob, remembering God's prophecy. A divided home laid the foundation for bitter conflict. One day, Esau returned famished from the hunt. Jacob was cooking lentil stew. Esau demanded it. Jacob seized his weakness. "Sell me your birthright first." In a reckless moment, Esau swore away his inheritance for a bowl of stew. Bread and lentils for the privilege of leading the family, inheriting the covenant of Abraham. The scriptures record it simply. Esau despised his birthright. Years passed. Isaac grew old, his eyes failing. Believing death near, he called Esau, "Take your bow. Hunt for me. Prepare the food I love, that I may bless you before I die." But Rebekah overheard. She remembered the words of the Lord, that the older would serve the younger. She acted swiftly. "Jacob," she said, "do exactly as I command. Bring me 2 young goats. I will prepare the dish your father loves. You will take it to him, and he will bless you." Jacob hesitated, not out of guilt, but fear. "My brother is hairy, and I am smooth. What if father touches me? I would bring a curse on myself." "Let the curse fall on me," Rebekah replied. "Only do what I say." Jacob obeyed. Rebekah clothed him in Esau's garments, covered his arms and neck with goatskins, and placed the dish in his hands. Jacob entered the tent. "My father." "Yes, my son. Who are you?" "I am Esau, your firstborn. I have done as you asked. Eat, that you may bless me." Isaac's suspicion stirred. "How did you find it so quickly?" "The Lord your God gave me success," Jacob lied. "Come near," Isaac said. He felt Jacob's arms. The voice is Jacob's, but the hands are Esau's. Still uncertain, he leaned close and smelled the garments. The scent of the field clung to them. At last, Isaac yielded, and he blessed him. "May God give you the dew of heaven, the richness of the earth, and abundance of grain and new wine. May nations serve you, and peoples bow down. Be Lord over your brothers. Cursed be those who curse you, and blessed be those who bless you." The covenant blessing of Abraham now rested on Jacob. Barely had he left when Esau entered with his game. "Father, rise and eat, that you may bless me." Isaac trembled violently. "Who was it then?" "I ate before you came. I blessed him, and indeed he will be blessed." Esau's cry shook the tent. "Bless me, me too, my father." But Isaac could not revoke what had been spoken. Weeping bitterly, Esau cried, "Is he not rightly named Jacob? He took my birthright, and now he has taken my blessing." Rage consumed him. "The days of mourning for my father are near. Then I will kill my brother Jacob." Rebekah, hearing of his threat, urged Jacob, "Flee at once to my brother Laban in Haran. Stay until your brother's fury subsides. Why should I lose both of you in one day?" Before Jacob departed, Isaac called him once more. No deception this time. He blessed him knowingly. "May God Almighty bless you, make you fruitful, and give you the blessing of Abraham, to you and your descendants, so you may inherit the land God gave Abraham." And so Jacob departed, carrying the promise of God, the hatred of his brother, and the weight of his own deceit. Not a hero, not yet a patriarch, but a fugitive, limping into destiny. Jacob fled into the wilderness alone. Behind him lay everything: home, family, his mother's embrace, his brother's murderous rage. Ahead stretched only uncertainty and the brutal desert road to Haran, hundreds of miles away through barren wasteland. He was a fugitive, with nothing but a staff in his hand, the clothes on his back, and a blessing he'd stolen through deception. The weight of what he'd done must have crushed him with every step. He'd betrayed his brother. He'd lied to his blind father. He'd torn his family apart. And now he was running for his life, exiled from everything he'd ever known. As the sun set on his first day of exile, exhaustion and fear overwhelmed him. He found himself in a desolate place. No village, no tent, no comfort. Just rocks and sand and the vast, indifferent sky. He took a stone, placed it under his head as a pillow, and lay down under the stars. The ground was hard, the night was cold, and Jacob was utterly alone. Perhaps he wondered if God would abandon a deceiver. Perhaps he feared Esau was already pursuing him. Perhaps guilt gnawed at him in the darkness. Perhaps he simply felt the crushing weight of isolation. Cast out, heading toward an unknown future with nothing but his own cunning. Then, as sleep took him, he dreamed. A stairway appeared before him. Not a vision, but something more real than reality itself. Its base was firmly planted on the earth where he lay, but its top reached into heaven, piercing through the clouds into the realm of the divine. And on this ladder, angels of God were ascending and descending in an endless, glorious procession. The traffic between heaven and earth had never stopped, and at the top of the stairway stood the Lord himself. "I am the Lord," the voice came, powerful as thunder, yet unexpectedly tender. "The God of your father, Abraham, and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie, I will give to you and your descendants." Your descendants will be like the dust of the earth, and you will spread out to the west and to the east, to the north and to the south. All peoples on earth will be blessed through you and your offspring. Jacob, the deceiver, the supplanter, the fugitive, was being given the covenant promise of Abraham, not because he deserved it, not because he'd earned it, but because God, in his sovereign choice, had decided to use him. Then came the words that would sustain Jacob through everything ahead. I am with you and will watch over you wherever you go, and I will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. It was unconditional. God wasn't asking Jacob to clean himself up first. He wasn't demanding perfection before offering protection. He was simply declaring, I am with you. I will not leave you. I will complete what I've started. Jacob woke with a start, his heart pounding. Surely the Lord is in this place, he gasped, and I was not aware of it. He looked around at the barren landscape, now transformed. This wasn't just a random spot. This was holy ground. God had been here all along. How awesome is this place? Jacob cried out. This is none other than the house of God. This is the gate of heaven. Early the next morning, Jacob took the stone he'd used as a pillow and set it upright as a pillar. He poured oil on it, consecrating it, marking this place as sacred. He named it Bethel, house of God, the place where heaven touched earth. Then Jacob made a vow. If God will be with me and will watch over me on this journey I am taking, and will give me food to eat and clothes to wear, so that I return safely to my father's household, then the Lord will be my God. And this stone that I have set up as a pillar will be God's house. And of all that you give me, I will give you a tenth. It was a response, a recognition that if God proved faithful to his promises, Jacob would respond with faithful worship. The deceiver was learning to trust. The schemer was learning to depend on something beyond his own cleverness. Jacob set his face toward Haran and continued his journey. But everything had changed. He was no longer traveling alone. Heaven had touched earth. God had spoken. The fugitive had been claimed by the divine. The ladder had bridged the gap. And Jacob carried that vision with him into the unknown. After weeks of grueling travel through desert and wilderness, Jacob finally arrived in the land of the eastern peoples. The journey had been long and dangerous, but the memory of that ladder, of God's promise at Bethel, had sustained him through every difficult mile. Near the town of Haran, he came upon a well in an open field. It was the kind of well that served as a gathering place, a hub of community life where shepherds brought their flocks each day. 3 flocks of sheep were lying near it, waiting patiently in the afternoon heat. The flocks were watered from that well, but a large stone covered its mouth, so large that it took several shepherds working together to roll it away. It was the custom to wait until all the flocks had gathered before removing the stone. Then the shepherds would water their sheep together and return the massive stone to its place, sealing the well until the next day. It was a system that required cooperation, community, shared effort. No single man could move that stone alone. Jacob approached the shepherds, resting in the shade. "My brothers, where are you from?" he called out, his voice carrying the dust and weariness of his long journey. "We're from Haran," they replied, studying this stranger with curiosity. Jacob's heart quickened with hope. After all this time, all these miles, he'd actually made it. "Do you know Laban, Nahor's grandson?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "Yes, we know him," they answered casually. "Is he well?" Jacob pressed, hungry for any news of his mother's family. "Yes, he is," they said. Then one of them pointed across the field. "And look, here comes his daughter Rachel with the sheep now." Jacob turned and saw her approaching across the sunlit field. She was tending her father's flock, moving with grace and confidence among the animals. Her father must have trusted her greatly to give her this responsibility. It was unusual for a daughter to shepherd, but she handled the work with capability and strength. As she drew closer, Jacob could see why the Bible would later describe her so simply but powerfully. She was lovely in form and beautiful. But it wasn't just her physical beauty that struck him. It was something in the way she carried herself, the competence in her movements, the life in her eyes. When Jacob realized this was his mother's brother's daughter, his own cousin, his family, his connection to home, when he saw that these were his uncle Laban's sheep, something powerful rose up in him. This was providence. This was God's promise already beginning to unfold. After all the running, all the fear, all the uncertainty, here was family. Here was hope. He strode over to the well with sudden purpose and supernatural strength. The shepherds watched in amazement as this stranger gripped the massive stone, the one that required multiple men to budge, and single-handedly rolled it away from the mouth of the well. Adrenaline, excitement, perhaps even divine enablement surged through Jacob's muscles. The stone moved. The well opened. Jacob watered his uncle's flock with his own hands, his eyes never leaving Rachel. She watched him with wonder. Who was this strong stranger who had appeared out of nowhere? Then, when the work was done, Jacob approached her. He kissed her in greeting, the customary kiss of relatives meeting, and something broke open inside him. All the loneliness of his journey, all the fear and uncertainty, all the weight of exile and separation from everything he'd known, all the months of running and hiding, it poured out in that moment. Jacob broke down and wept aloud, tears streaming down his face in front of this woman he'd just met. He told Rachel who he was, that he was a relative of her father, that he was Rebekah's son, that he'd traveled hundreds of miles to find family. Rachel's eyes widened with wonder and joy. Without a word, she turned and ran home to tell her father the news. She burst through the door, breathless. "Mother, father, Rebekah's son is here. Jacob has come." When Laban heard the news about Jacob, his sister's son, he hurried out to meet him. He embraced him, kissed him warmly, and brought him into his home. Jacob told him all that had happened, though perhaps he was careful about certain details regarding how exactly he'd come to leave home so suddenly, why his brother wasn't with him, why he'd arrived with nothing but the staff in his hand. "You are my own flesh and blood," Laban declared with feeling. And so Jacob stayed with him. For an entire month, Jacob lived in Laban's household. He worked hard, helping with the flocks and the daily labor, never asking for payment or making demands. He was simply grateful. Grateful for refuge, grateful for family, grateful to be near Rachel. Because with each passing day, his feelings for her had deepened into something he couldn't deny. But Laban was a shrewd businessman, and he recognized an opportunity when he saw one. This nephew of his was a tireless worker, strong and capable. After a month of watching Jacob labor without complaint, Laban approached him. "Just because you are a relative of mine, should you work for me for nothing?" Laban said, his tone reasonable and generous. "Tell me what your wages should be." Now Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the older was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. The Bible tells us that Leah had weak eyes. The Hebrew is unclear, but it seems to suggest she lacked something. Perhaps beauty, perhaps the vitality and spark that made her younger sister so captivating. But Rachel was lovely in form and beautiful, striking in every way that mattered. And Jacob, against all his calculating nature, against all his history of scheming and planning, had fallen deeply, completely, irrevocably in love with Rachel. So Jacob answered Laban's question without hesitation. "I'll work for you 7 years, in return for your younger daughter Rachel." 7 years. It was an enormous bride price, far more than custom required, far more than any reasonable man would offer. But Jacob didn't care about reason. He didn't try to negotiate or scheme for a better deal. Love had made him reckless, generous, willing to give everything. Laban considered the offer, and his response came quickly. "It's better that I give her to you than to some other man. Stay here with me." And so the agreement was struck. Jacob would serve 7 years to get Rachel. But here, the Bible adds one of the most beautiful, poignant lines in all of Scripture. So Jacob served 7 years to get Rachel, but they seemed like only a few days to him because of his love for her. Love transformed time itself. 7 years, 2,555 days of hard labor under the brutal Middle Eastern sun, felt like mere days because every moment brought him closer to Rachel. Every sunrise was a gift because he would see her face. Every evening was sweet because they would talk by the well. Every season that passed was another season nearer to their wedding day. He worked with the strength and joy of a man in love, his eyes always finding her across the fields, his heart sustained by the certainty of their future together. The deceiver had become a lover. The schemer had become a servant. And for 7 years, Jacob learned what it meant to wait, to work, to earn something precious through patient devotion, rather than cunning theft. Finally, after 2,555 days of labor and longing, the 7 years came to an end. Jacob went to Laban, his voice firm, with earned authority. "Give me my wife. My time is completed, and I want to marry her." Laban smiled and agreed. He gathered all the people of the place and gave a great feast. Wine flowed freely. Music filled the air. Celebration roared long into the night. And when darkness had fully fallen, when the torches burned low and the guests were drunk with wine, Laban brought a veiled bride to Jacob's tent. The night passed in darkness and anticipation, but morning came with harsh revelation. Jacob woke beside his new wife. He turned to her, reached for the veil, pulled it back, and stared into Leah's eyes. Not Rachel, Leah. The shock must have been devastating. Disbelief, betrayal, rage, all crashing over him at once. He leaped up and stormed to Laban's tent, his voice shaking with fury. "What is this you have done to me?" Jacob shouted. "I served you for Rachel, didn't I? Why have you deceived me?" Laban's reply was calm, measured, almost mocking in its reasonableness. "It is not our custom here to give the younger daughter in marriage before the older one. Finish this daughter's bridal week. Then we will give you the younger one also, in return for another 7 years of work." The irony must have cut Jacob to the bone. He who had supplanted his older brother Esau was now forced to honor the older sister before the younger. The deceiver had been deceived with precision and poetry. The pattern he'd inflicted on his own family had been inflicted on him, measure for measure, theft for theft. Jacob had no choice, no leverage, no way out. He was trapped by his own love and by Laban's cunning. So Jacob did what Laban demanded. He finished the week's marriage celebration with Leah. Then Laban gave him Rachel as well, and Jacob finally married the woman he loved. But the damage was done. Jacob made no secret of his feelings. He loved Rachel more than Leah, and everyone knew it. The Lord saw that Leah was unloved. Leah, the unwanted wife, the substitute bride, the woman whose own father had used her as a pawn. She woke each morning beside a husband whose heart belonged to her sister. She saw the way Jacob's face lit up when Rachel entered the room, the way it dimmed when he looked at her. In his mercy, God opened Leah's womb while Rachel remained barren. Leah conceived and bore a son. She named him Reuben. "See, a son," her voice breaking with hope. "Surely my husband will love me now. Surely a son would win Jacob's heart. Surely this would change everything." But nothing changed. Jacob's eyes still followed Rachel. So Leah conceived again and bore a second son. She named him Simeon, one who hears, saying with quiet desperation, "Because the Lord heard that I am not loved, he gave me this one too." God was listening, even if Jacob wasn't. She conceived a third time and bore another son. She named him Levi, attached, crying out, "Now at last, my husband will become attached to me because I have borne him 3 sons." 3 sons. Surely 3 sons were enough. Surely now he would see her, value her, love her. But still, Jacob's heart remained fixed on Rachel. Then Leah conceived a 4th time, and something shifted inside her. When she gave birth to this son, she didn't name him in reference to Jacob at all. She named him Judah, praise, saying simply, "This time I will praise the Lord." She had stopped waiting for Jacob's love. She had stopped measuring her worth by her husband's affection. She turned her eyes to the God who saw her, who heard her, who had never abandoned her. Meanwhile, Rachel burned with envy. She had Jacob's love, but no children. Leah had children, but no love. And the comparison was destroying them both. "Give me children, or I'll die," Rachel cried to Jacob in desperation. Jacob's anger flared at her. "Am I in the place of God, who has kept you from having children?" It was a harsh response, but perhaps he felt helpless, caught between 2 women, unable to satisfy either one. So Rachel, following the custom of the time, gave Jacob her servant Bilhah. "Sleep with her so that she can bear children for me, and I too can build a family through her." Bilhah conceived and bore Jacob a son. Rachel named him Dan. "He has vindicated me," declaring, "God has vindicated me. He has listened to my plea and given me a son." Bilhah conceived again and bore a second son. Rachel named him Naphtali, "My struggle," saying with grim satisfaction, "I have had a great struggle with my sister, and I have won." But the battle wasn't over. When Leah saw that she had stopped having children, she took her servant Zilpah and gave her to Jacob as a wife. Zilpah bore Jacob a son. Leah named him Gad, good fortune, and said, "What good fortune?" Zilpah bore Jacob a second son. Leah named him Asher, happy, declaring, "How happy I am. The women will call me happy." The household had become a battlefield, 2 sisters competing for a man's love, 2 servants bearing sons for their mistresses. And at the center of it all, Jacob, the man who had once schemed and deceived, now trapped in a situation he couldn't control, caught in consequences he hadn't foreseen. Then came an incident that revealed just how desperate things had become. During wheat harvest, Reuben found some mandrake plants in the field, plants believed to enhance fertility, and brought them to his mother Leah. Rachel saw them and begged, "Please give me some of your son's mandrakes." But Leah's response was sharp, bitter. "Wasn't it enough that you took away my husband? Will you take my son's mandrakes too?" The truth, spoken at last. "You took my husband." The wound was still open, still bleeding. Rachel offered a terrible bargain. "Very well. He can sleep with you tonight in return for your son's mandrakes." They were bartering for their own husband, trading nights with him like commodity. The degradation was complete. That evening, when Jacob came in from the fields, Leah went out to meet him. "You must sleep with me," she said. "I have hired you with my son's mandrakes." So Jacob slept with Leah that night, and God listened to Leah. She conceived and bore Jacob a fifth son. She named him Issachar, reward, saying, "God has rewarded me for giving my servant to my husband." Leah conceived again and bore a sixth son. She named him Zebulun, honor, saying, "God has presented me with a precious gift. This time my husband will treat me with honor, because I have borne him 6 sons." Later, she gave birth to a daughter and named her Dinah. Then finally, God remembered Rachel. He listened to her and enabled her to conceive. She gave birth to a son and said, "God has taken away my disgrace." She named him Joseph. May he add, saying, "May the Lord add to me another son." After years of barrenness, years of watching her sister bear child after child, Rachel finally held her own son. The beloved wife had become a mother. But the dysfunction, the favoritism, the wounds inflicted in this broken household, they would echo through generations. These sons, born from rivalry and pain, would become the 12 tribes of Israel, and the patterns of their parents' sins would haunt them. After Joseph was born, Jacob went to Laban with a request that had been burning in his heart for years. "Send me on my way, so I can go back to my own homeland," Jacob said. "Give me my wives and children, for whom I have served you, and I will be on my way. You know how much work I've done for you." 20 years. Jacob had been in Haran for 20 years. He'd arrived as a fugitive with nothing but a staff. Now he had wives, children, and the weight of 2 decades of servitude pressing on him. The pull of home had grown unbearable. It was time to return. But Laban wasn't ready to lose his most valuable worker. "If I have found favor in your eyes," Laban said smoothly, his voice dripping with false generosity, "please stay. I have learned by divination that the Lord has blessed me because of you." Then he added, as if doing Jacob a favor, "Name your wages, and I will pay them." Jacob responded carefully, knowing he was dealing with a master manipulator. "You know how I have worked for you, and how your livestock has fared under my care. The little you had before I came has increased greatly, and the Lord has blessed you wherever I have been. But now, when may I do something for my own household?" They negotiated. Jacob proposed what seemed like a simple arrangement. He would take all the speckled, spotted, and dark-colored sheep and goats as his wages, the less desirable animals that were a small minority of the flock. The solid-colored animals, the valuable majority, would remain Laban's. Laban agreed immediately, thinking he was getting an incredible bargain, that his naive nephew had finally been outwitted. But Jacob wasn't the same man who'd arrived 20 years earlier. God gave him wisdom and strategy through selective breeding and what Scripture describes as divine intervention. Jacob's flocks multiplied dramatically. The speckled and spotted animals increased, while Laban's pure-colored flocks diminished. Week by week, month by month, Jacob grew exceedingly prosperous. He acquired large flocks, female and male servants, and camels and donkeys. His wealth became undeniable. Laban's sons began to mutter bitterly among themselves, "Jacob has taken everything our father owned and has gained all this wealth from what belonged to our father." The resentment was palpable, and Jacob noticed that Laban's attitude toward him had changed dramatically. The warmth was gone, replaced by cold suspicion and barely concealed hostility. Then the Lord spoke to Jacob clearly. "Go back to the land of your fathers and to your relatives, and I will be with you." It was time. God was calling him home. The exile was ending. Jacob sent word to Rachel and Leah to meet him out in the fields where his flocks were grazing. Away from listening ears, he gathered them and spoke urgently. "I see that your father's attitude toward me is not what it was before, but the God of my father has been with me. You know that I've worked for your father with all my strength, yet your father has cheated me by changing my wages 10 times. However, God has not allowed him to harm me. 10 times. Laban had changed their agreement 10 times, always trying to gain advantage, always manipulating the terms to benefit himself. But each time, God had protected Jacob, turning Laban's schemes to nothing. Rachel and Leah's response was immediate and bitter. "Do we still have any share in the inheritance of our father's estate? Does he not regard us as foreigners? Not only has he sold us, but he has used up what was paid for us. Surely all the wealth that God took away from our father belongs to us and our children. So do whatever God has told you." Their own father had betrayed them. He'd used them as bargaining chips, taken the bride price that should have been theirs, and shown more concern for his flocks than for his daughters. They were ready to leave. So Jacob acted quickly. He put his children and his wives on camels, and he drove all his livestock ahead of him, along with all the goods he had accumulated in Paddan Aram. He set out for the land of Canaan, to his father Isaac, without telling Laban he was leaving. It was a secret flight, necessary because Laban would never have let them go willingly. When Laban discovered 3 days later that they had fled, fury consumed him. He gathered his relatives and pursued Jacob for 7 days, finally catching up with him in the hill country of Gilead. Laban came with men and anger, ready for confrontation. But the night before he reached Jacob, God appeared to Laban in a dream. "Be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad," God warned him sternly. Divine protection surrounded Jacob even as his father-in-law hunted him down. When Laban confronted Jacob, he was angry but restrained by God's warning. "What have you done? You've deceived me, and you've carried off my daughters like captives in war. Why did you run off secretly and deceive me? Why didn't you tell me, so I could send you away with joy and singing to the music of timbrels and harps?" The hypocrisy was stunning. This man who had deceived Jacob at every turn was now playing the victim. Jacob's response was sharp. "I was afraid, because I thought you would take your daughters away from me by force." They searched the camp for Laban's household gods, which Rachel had secretly stolen, but found nothing. Rachel had hidden them in her camel's saddle and sat on them, claiming she couldn't stand because she was having her period. The deception continued, passed down through generations. Then Jacob's anger exploded. 20 years of frustration poured out in a torrent. "What is my crime? How have I wronged you that you hunt me down? I have been with you for 20 years now. Your sheep and goats have not miscarried, nor have I eaten rams from your flocks. I did not bring you animals torn by wild beasts. I bore the loss myself, and you demanded payment from me for whatever was stolen by day or night. This was my situation. The heat consumed me in the daytime, and the cold at night, and sleep fled from my eyes. It was like this for the 20 years I was in your household. If the God of my father had not been with me, you would surely have sent me away empty-handed. But God has seen my hardship and the toil of my hands, and last night he rebuked you. It was a devastating indictment. Jacob had given everything, his youth, his strength, his best years, and Laban had exploited him at every turn. They made a covenant that day, piling up stones as a witness between them. May the Lord keep watch between you and me when we are away from each other, Laban said. The words sounded like a blessing, but carried the weight of threat. May God judge between us. Early the next morning, Laban kissed his grandchildren and his daughters goodbye and blessed them. Then he left and returned home, and they never saw each other again. Jacob went on his way, finally free from Laban's control. But ahead of him lay an even greater confrontation. With the brother he'd betrayed 20 years before, Jacob sent messengers ahead to his brother Esau in the land of Seir, the country of Edom. The moment he'd been dreading for 20 years had arrived. He couldn't avoid it any longer. This is what you are to say to my lord Esau, Jacob instructed his servants carefully. Your servant Jacob says, I have been staying with Laban and have remained there till now. I have cattle and donkeys, sheep and goats, male and female servants. Now I am sending this message to my lord, that I may find favor in your eyes. The language was carefully chosen, deliberately humble. Jacob called Esau, my lord, and himself, your servant. He was trying to appease the brother whose birthright he'd stolen, whose blessing he'd taken through deception, whose murder threat had sent him fleeing into exile 2 decades earlier. When the messengers returned, they brought news that turned Jacob's blood to ice. We went to your brother Esau, and now he is coming to meet you, and 400 men are with him. 400 men. That wasn't a welcoming committee. That wasn't a family reunion. That was an army. That was revenge. In great fear and distress, Jacob divided the people who were with him into 2 groups, and the flocks and herds and camels as well. He thought, if Esau comes and attacks one group, the group that is left may escape. It was strategic thinking born of terror. If one camp was slaughtered, perhaps the other could flee. Then Jacob prayed, and it was perhaps the most honest, desperate prayer he'd ever prayed. O God of my father Abraham, God of my father Isaac, Lord, you who said to me, go back to your country and your relatives, and I will make you prosper. I am unworthy of all the kindness and faithfulness you have shown your servant. I had only my staff when I crossed this Jordan, but now I have become 2 camps. Save me, I pray, from the hand of my brother Esau, for I am afraid he will come and attack me, and also the mothers with their children. But you have said, I will surely make you prosper, and will make your descendants like the sand of the sea, which cannot be counted. No bargaining, no deals, just raw fear, honest admission of unworthiness, and clinging to God's promises. Jacob was finally learning to depend on something beyond his own schemes. Then he prepared an enormous gift for Esau, wave after wave of animals sent ahead. 200 female goats and 20 male goats, 200 ewes and 20 rams, 30 female camels with their young, 40 cows and 10 bulls, and 20 female donkeys and 10 male donkeys. He divided them into separate herds and told his servants, go ahead of me and keep some space between the herds. He instructed the servant in front. When my brother Esau meets you and asks, who do you belong to? And where are you going? And who owns all these animals in front of you?" Then you are to say, "They belong to your servant Jacob. They are a gift sent to my lord Esau, and he is coming behind us." He gave similar instructions to all the others, hoping that each successive gift would soften Esau's heart before they actually met face to face. That night, Jacob took his 2 wives, his 2 female servants, and his 11 sons, and crossed the ford of the Jabbok. He sent them across the stream, along with all his possessions, and then Jacob was alone in the darkness. In that solitary moment, a man appeared and began wrestling with him. It was no ordinary wrestling match. This was violent, desperate combat, a struggle for Jacob's very soul. All through the night they grappled in the darkness, neither gaining advantage. Jacob refused to let go, refused to surrender, fighting with everything he had. His entire life had been a wrestling match, with his brother, with his father-in-law, with his own nature. And now he was wrestling with God himself. When the man saw that he could not overpower Jacob, he touched the socket of Jacob's hip. Instantly, Jacob's hip was wrenched out of joint. The pain must have been excruciating, blinding. But still, Jacob held on. Then the man said, "Let me go, for it is daybreak." But Jacob, gasping through the agony, replied with stunning audacity, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." Even crippled, even in agony, even with his hip dislocated, Jacob held on. This was who he was, the man who'd grasped his brother's heel at birth, who'd wrestled for advantage his entire life. But now, he wasn't wrestling for a birthright or a blessing obtained through deception. He was wrestling for a blessing given by God himself. He was refusing to let go until God transformed him. The man asked him, "What is your name?" "Jacob," he answered, and in that moment, saying his own name, he was admitting everything. Jacob, heel grabber, deceiver, supplanter, schemer. It was a confession of his entire identity. Then the man spoke words that changed everything. "Your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with humans and have overcome." A new name, a new identity. Israel, he struggles with God, or God fights. The deceiver had become the wrestler. The schemer had become the one who refused to let go of God until God blessed him. His struggle was being transformed from something selfish into something sacred. Jacob asked, "Please tell me your name." But the man replied, "Why do you ask my name?" Then he blessed him there, and Jacob knew he'd been wrestling with the divine. The sun rose above him as he passed Peniel. The name Jacob gave that place, meaning face of God, and he was limping because of his hip. Jacob limped now. The wrestling had left its permanent mark, but he had a new name, a new blessing, and he had survived a face-to-face encounter with God. The limp was a reminder of his weakness, of his dependence, of the night heaven touched earth and broke him to remake him. Jacob looked up from Peniel, and there, in the morning light, he saw Esau approaching with his 400 men. The moment of reckoning had arrived. Jacob divided his children among Leah, Rachel, and the 2 female servants, putting the servants and their children in front, Leah and her children next, and Rachel and Joseph last, protecting those he loved most. Then he himself went on ahead and bowed down to the ground 7 times as he approached his brother. But Esau ran to meet him. Instead of the violence Jacob feared, Esau embraced him. He threw his arms around his neck and kissed him, and they both wept. 20 years of separation, 20 years of fear and guilt, dissolved in tears. The brother Jacob had wronged had chosen mercy over vengeance, grace over justice. "Who are these with you?" Esau asked, looking at Jacob's family. "They are the children God has graciously given your servant," Jacob replied. Esau initially refused Jacob's gifts. "I already have plenty, my brother. Keep what you have for yourself." But Jacob insisted, "Please accept the present that was brought to you, for God has been gracious to me, and I have all I need." The Hebrew literally says, "I have everything," a profound statement from a man who'd arrived in Haran with nothing but a staff. After they parted ways peacefully, Jacob traveled to Succoth, then to Shechem in Canaan. He purchased a plot of land and set up his tent. He built an altar there and called it El Elohi Israel, God, the God of Israel. The fugitive had returned. The exile had come home. But peace was short-lived. Jacob's daughter Dinah went out to visit the women of the land. Shechem, son of Hamor, the ruler of that region, saw her, took her, and violated her. But then, in a disturbing twist, he fell in love with her and spoke tenderly to her. He begged his father, "Get me this girl as my wife." When Jacob heard that his daughter had been defiled, his sons were out in the fields with the livestock. He kept quiet until they came home. When his sons heard what had happened, they were shocked and furious. Such a thing should not be done. Hamor came to negotiate. "My son Shechem has his heart set on your daughter. Please give her to him as his wife. Intermarry with us, give us your daughters, and take our daughters for yourselves." Shechem himself added, "Let me find favor in your eyes, and I will give you whatever you ask. Make the bride price as great as you like, and I'll pay whatever you ask me. Only give me the young woman as my wife." Jacob's sons replied deceitfully, the family pattern continuing, saying they would agree only if every male in the city was circumcised. Hamor and Shechem agreed and convinced all the men of their city to be circumcised. 3 days later, while all of them were still in pain, 2 of Jacob's sons, Simeon and Levi, Dinah's full brothers, took their swords and attacked the unsuspecting city, killing every male. They killed Hamor and Shechem, took Dinah from Shechem's house, and left. Jacob's other sons came upon the dead bodies and looted the city where their sister had been defiled. They seized the flocks and herds and donkeys, everything in the city and in the fields, and carried off all the wealth, women, and children. Jacob was horrified. "You have brought trouble on me by making me obnoxious to the Canaanites and Perizzites, the people living in this land. We are few in number, and if they join forces against me and attack me, I and my household will be destroyed." But Simeon and Levi replied defiantly, "Should he have treated our sister like a prostitute?" Violence had poisoned Jacob's household. The sins of the father, deception, favoritism, cunning, were manifesting in his sons in even darker forms. God spoke to Jacob, "Go up to Bethel and settle there, and build an altar there to God, who appeared to you when you were fleeing from your brother Esau." Back to Bethel, back to the place where heaven had touched earth, where God had first spoken his promise to a terrified fugitive. It was time to return to the beginning. Jacob told his household, "Get rid of the foreign gods you have with you, and purify yourselves and change your clothes. Then come, let us go up to Bethel, where I will build an altar to God, who answered me in the day of my distress, and who has been with me wherever I have gone." They gave Jacob all their foreign gods and earrings, and he buried them under the oak at Shechem. A purging, a fresh start. As they traveled, the terror of God fell on the towns around them, and no one pursued them. divine protection, covering Jacob's vulnerable family. At Bethel, Jacob built an altar and called the place El Bethel, God of Bethel, because it was there God revealed himself when Jacob was fleeing from his brother. Then they set out from Bethel. But while they were still some distance from Ephrath, Rachel began to give birth and had great difficulty. As she was having difficulty in childbirth, the midwife said to her, "Don't despair, for you have another son." Rachel, Jacob's beloved wife, the woman for whom he'd worked 14 years, was dying. With her last breath, she named him Ben-Oni, son of my trouble. But Jacob refused that name. He called him Benjamin, son of my right hand. Rachel died and was buried on the way to Ephrath, that is, Bethlehem. Over her tomb, Jacob set up a pillar, and to this day, that pillar marks Rachel's tomb. Jacob's heart shattered. The love of his life, the woman who'd made 7 years feel like days, was gone. He buried her by the roadside and moved on, grief-stricken, with their 2 sons and the family that would never be whole again. Israel, the man once called Jacob, settled in the land where his father Isaac had stayed, the land of Canaan. His household was vast, but it was divided by old wounds, jealousy, and the poison of favoritism. Among all his sons, Jacob loved Joseph most. Joseph was Rachel's firstborn, the son of his beloved wife, a reminder of the woman he'd lost. And Jacob made no attempt to hide his preference. He made an ornate robe for Joseph, a richly ornamented garment with long sleeves. It wasn't the clothing of a shepherd who worked with his hands. It was a robe that said, "This one is different. This one is set apart. This one will rule, not serve." When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of them, they hated Joseph and could not speak a kind word to him. The household had become toxic with resentment. Then Joseph made it worse. He had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him all the more. "Listen to this dream I had," he said. "We were binding sheaves of grain out in the field when suddenly my sheaf rose and stood upright, while your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down to it." His brother's response dripped with contempt. "Do you intend to reign over us? Will you actually rule us?" And they hated him all the more because of his dream and what he had said. But Joseph dreamed again. "Listen," he said, "I had another dream, and this time the sun and moon and 11 stars were bowing down to me." When he told his father, as well as his brothers, Jacob rebuked him. "What is this dream you had? Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow down to the ground before you?" Even Jacob was disturbed by the implications. Yet the Bible adds a crucial detail. While his brothers were jealous of him, his father kept the matter in mind. Jacob remembered his own story, how God spoke through dreams, how the younger was chosen over the elder, how impossible prophecies came true. The dreams planted seeds that would grow into destiny. But first, they would nearly destroy Joseph. One day, when Joseph's brothers were grazing the flocks near Shechem, Jacob sent Joseph to check on them. "Go and see if all is well with your brothers and with the flocks," he said. Perhaps it was innocent concern. Perhaps Jacob didn't realize the danger he was sending his favorite son into. Joseph set out in his ornate robe, walking straight into betrayal. When his brothers saw him from a distance, that hated robe unmistakable against the landscape, they plotted to kill him. "Here comes that dreamer," they said with venom. "Come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of these cisterns and say that a ferocious animal devoured him. Then we'll see what comes of his dreams." It was Reuben, the firstborn, who intervened. "Let's not take his life," he said. "Throw him into this cistern here in the wilderness, but don't lay a hand on him." Reuben secretly planned to rescue Joseph and return him to their father. So when Joseph arrived, breathless and innocent, his brothers seized him. They stripped off his robe, that symbol of everything they despised, and threw him into an empty cistern. No water, just darkness and despair. Then they sat down to eat, Joseph's cries echoing from the depths while they chewed their bread. Looking up, they saw a caravan of Ishmaelite traders approaching, their camels loaded with spices, balm and myrrh, heading down to Egypt. Judah had an idea. What will we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh and blood. His brothers agreed. They pulled Joseph up from the cistern. Hope must have surged through him for a moment, only to sell him for 20 shekels of silver, the price of a slave. As the caravan moved away, Joseph looked back at his brothers, disbelief and betrayal written on his face. The dreamer was being dragged toward Egypt, toward slavery, toward what seemed like the death of every promise. Now they faced their father. They slaughtered a goat and dipped Joseph's robe in its blood until it was unrecognizable. Then they brought it to Jacob. "We found this," they said, their voices carefully neutral. "Examine it to see whether it is your son's robe." Jacob recognized it instantly. "It is my son's robe," he cried. "Some ferocious animal has devoured him. Joseph has surely been torn to pieces." He tore his clothes, put on sackcloth, and mourned with a grief that consumed him. "I will continue to mourn until I join my son in the grave," he said. The deceiver had been deceived again, by his own sons, using the same method he'd once used on his father. Blood on a garment, a lie told, a father's heart broken. Years of sorrow stretched ahead for Israel. But in Egypt, God was at work. Famine came to Canaan. It started slowly, a poor harvest one year, worse the next. But by the third year, the reality was undeniable. The land was dying. Wells ran low, crops failed, livestock grew thin. The household of Israel, once prosperous, faced starvation. Jacob, now elderly and worn by years of grief, watched his family's supplies dwindle. The grain stores were nearly empty. His sons sat idle, staring at each other with growing desperation. Then word came, there was grain in Egypt. Someone had predicted the famine and prepared. Egypt's granaries were full. Jacob looked at his sons with hard eyes. "Why do you just keep looking at each other?" His voice carried the sharpness of a man pushed to his limit. "I have heard there is grain in Egypt. Go down there and buy some for us, so that we may live and not die." 10 of Jacob's sons prepared for the journey, but when Benjamin moved to join them, Jacob's hand shot out. "No. Father, we need—" "No." The old patriarch's voice shook. "Benjamin stays here." The fear was naked in his eyes. Joseph was gone, torn apart by a wild animal. Or so he believed. Benjamin was all he had left of Rachel. If anything happened to Benjamin, it would kill him. So the 10 brothers went down to Egypt, and Benjamin remained behind with his father. Weeks passed. Jacob waited, anxiety gnawing at him. When his sons finally returned, they brought grain, but they also brought a story that made no sense. "The man who is lord over the land spoke harshly to us," they explained, their faces troubled. "He accused us of being spies. We told him we were honest men. 12 brothers, sons of one father. One is no more, and the youngest is with our father in Canaan." Jacob listened, unease growing. The man said, "We must prove we're not spies." he kept Simeon in prison. He said, "We cannot return unless we bring our youngest brother back with us." The words hit Jacob like a physical blow. "You have deprived me of my children," he cried out. "Joseph is no more, and Simeon is no more, and now you want to take Benjamin. Everything is against me." Reuben stepped forward. "You may put both of my sons to death if I do not bring him back to you. Entrust him to my care, and I will bring him back." But Jacob refused absolutely. "My son will not go down there with you. His brother is dead, and he is the only one left. If harm comes to him on the journey you are taking, you will bring my gray head down to the grave in sorrow." They had grain, but it wouldn't last, and without Benjamin, they couldn't get more. And Simeon remained imprisoned in Egypt. Jacob tried to make the grain last as long as possible, rationing it carefully. But famine doesn't negotiate. The day came when the sacks were empty again. "Go back," Jacob said quietly. "Buy us a little more food." Judah stepped forward, his voice firm. "The man warned us solemnly, 'You will not see my face again unless your brother is with you. If you will send our brother along with us, we will go down and buy food for you. But if you will not send him, we will not go down. Because the man said to us, "You will not see my face again unless your brother is with you." Jacob's face hardened with anger and grief. "Why did you bring this trouble on me by telling the man you had another brother?" "The man questioned us closely about ourselves and our family," they replied. "Is your father still living? Do you have another brother?" We simply answered his questions. How were we to know he would say, "Bring your brother down here"? Then Judah, the fourth son, spoke words that cut through Jacob's defenses. "Send the boy along with me, and we will go at once, so that we and you and our children may live and not die. I myself will guarantee his safety. You can hold me personally responsible for him. If I do not bring him back to you and set him here before you, I will bear the blame before you all my life. As it is, if we had not delayed, we could have gone and returned twice." Jacob looked at his sons. He looked at the empty grain sacks. He looked at his grandchildren with hunger in their eyes. He was trapped. Refusing to send Benjamin meant certain starvation. Sending him meant risking the last piece of Rachel he had left. The old patriarch's shoulders sagged. He was being forced to make the choice he'd sworn he'd never make. "If it must be, then do this," he said finally, his voice heavy with resignation. "Take some of the best products of the land in your bags and take them down to the man as a gift. A little balm and a little honey, some spices and myrrh, some pistachio nuts and almonds. Take double the amount of silver with you, for you must return the silver that was put back into the mouths of your sacks. Perhaps it was a mistake. Take your brother also and go back to the man at once." Then Jacob did the only thing left to him. He prayed, "May God Almighty grant you mercy before the man, so that he will let your other brother and Benjamin come back with you." And then came the words that captured everything: his exhaustion, his defeat, his broken resignation to whatever God's will might be. "As for me, if I am bereaved, I am bereaved." It was surrender. Not faith exactly, but the acknowledgement that he had no control left. He'd spent his life grasping, controlling, manipulating. He'd wrestled with men and with God. But now, in his old age, with famine at his door and his beloved son at risk, Jacob could only let go. He watched them leave, Benjamin among them. And the old man waited, as he'd waited so many times before, not knowing if he would ever see his son again. The deceiver who had once stolen a blessing was learning what it meant to have everything stripped away. The father who had shown such favoritism was paying the price. The wrestler who had refused to release God's angel until he received a blessing was now forced to release his son into God's hands. Jacob waited, and in the waiting, the question hung over him. Was God still faithful to the promises made at Bethel, or had his sins finally cost him everything? When the messengers arrived, Jacob didn't believe them. "Joseph is alive," they said breathlessly. "He is alive, and he is ruler of all Egypt." Jacob stared at them. His face showed nothing. The words made no sense. Joseph was dead. He had mourned for him for 22 years. He had the bloodied robe. He knew what had happened. "Father," Judah said gently, "it's true. Joseph is alive. We saw him. We spoke with him. He's the one who's been selling us grain. He revealed himself to us, and he wants you to come to Egypt." Jacob's heart grew cold and distant. He couldn't afford to hope. Hope was too dangerous after so much loss. But then they brought him outside and showed him the carts, wagons sent from Egypt, loaded with provisions. Egyptian carts, sturdy and well-made, sent specifically to transport an old man and his household. Something shifted in Jacob's chest. His hands trembled as he touched the wood. "My son Joseph is still alive," he whispered. Then louder, wonder breaking through. "My son Joseph is still alive. I will go and see him before I die." The spirit that had been crushed under years of grief suddenly revived. Israel, the wrestler, the survivor, stirred again in the old man's bones. They prepared for the journey. Jacob's entire household, children, grandchildren, servants, flocks, all moving toward Egypt. It was an exodus, a migration, the movement of a clan. When they reached Beersheba, the place where his grandfather Abraham had made a covenant with God, Jacob stopped. He offered sacrifices to the God of his father, Isaac. That night, God spoke to him in a vision. "Jacob, Jacob, here I am," he replied. "I am God, the God of your father," the voice came. "Do not be afraid to go down to Egypt, for I will make you into a great nation there. I will go down to Egypt with you, and I will surely bring you back again. And Joseph's own hand will close your eyes." It was permission. It was promise. It was the same God who had spoken at Bethel when Jacob was a fugitive. The same God who had wrestled with him at Peniel and given him a new name. God had never left him, even in the years of mourning. Even when Jacob couldn't see it, God had been working. So Jacob set out from Beersheba with renewed strength. His sons took him and their children and their wives in the carts Pharaoh had sent. They took their livestock and the possessions they had acquired in Canaan. 70 people in all went down to Egypt with Jacob, his sons and grandsons, his daughters and granddaughters. The promise made to Abraham that his descendants would be as numerous as the stars was taking shape. When they neared Egypt, Jacob sent Judah ahead to get directions to Goshen, where Joseph had said they should settle. And then Joseph prepared his chariot and went to Goshen to meet his father. The moment Joseph saw Israel, he threw his arms around his father and wept for a long time. Jacob held him. This son he'd thought was dead, this boy who'd worn the ornate robe, this man who was now second only to Pharaoh. The old patriarch's tears mixed with his sons. "Now I am ready to die," Israel said, "since I have seen for myself that you are still alive." But Jacob would not die yet. God had more for him to do. Israel lived in Egypt 17 years. He saw his family multiply and prosper in Goshen. He saw his grandchildren and great-grandchildren. The famine passed, but Jacob remained in Egypt, among his sons, in peace. When he was 147 years old and knew his time was near, Jacob called for Joseph. "Bring your sons to me," he said, "so I may bless them." Joseph brought Ephraim and Manasseh. Israel's eyes were weak with age. Jacob kissed them and embraced them. "I never expected to see your face again," Jacob said to Joseph, "and now God has allowed me to see your children too." Joseph positioned the boys carefully. Manasseh, the firstborn, by Jacob's right hand, and Ephraim the younger by Jacob's left. But Jacob crossed his hands, putting his right hand on Ephraim's head and his left on Manasseh's. "Not so, my father," Joseph said, trying to correct him. "This one is the firstborn. Put your right hand on his head." But Jacob refused to uncross them. "I know, my son, I know. He too will become a people, and he too will become great. Nevertheless, his younger brother will be greater than he." The pattern held, the theme of Jacob's entire life: the younger over the elder, God's sovereign choice overturning human expectation. Then Jacob called all 12 of his sons to gather around his bed. His voice, though weak, carried the weight of prophecy. "Gather around, so I can tell you what will happen to you in days to come. Assemble and listen, sons of Jacob. Listen to your father Israel." To each son, he spoke words of blessing or rebuke. "Reuben, the firstborn. Turbulent as the waters, you will no longer excel. Simeon and Levi. Cursed be their anger, so fierce, and their fury, so cruel. I will scatter them in Israel." But when he came to Judah, his words changed. "Judah, your brothers will praise you. The scepter will not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until he, to whom it belongs, shall come. From Judah would come kings. From Judah would come David. And from David's line, though Jacob couldn't see it, would come the Messiah." To Joseph, he spoke with tenderness. "Joseph is a fruitful vine near a spring. With bitterness, archers attacked him, but his bow remained steady. His strong arm stayed limber because of the hand of the mighty one of Jacob." Then to all of them together, "I am about to be gathered to my people. Bury me with my fathers in the cave, in the field of Machpelah, near Mamre in Canaan, in the cave that Abraham bought. There Abraham and Sarah were buried. There Isaac and Rebekah were buried, and there I buried Leah." When Jacob finished giving instructions to his sons, he drew his feet up into the bed, breathed his last, and was gathered to his people. Joseph fell on his father's face and wept over him and kissed him. The Egyptians mourned for Israel 70 days, a mourning period reserved for great leaders. Then, with Pharaoh's permission, Joseph took his father's body back to Canaan. It was a massive procession. All of Pharaoh's officials, the dignitaries of his court, and all the members of Joseph's household traveled with the sons of Israel. They buried Jacob in the cave at Machpelah, in the land God had promised to Abraham. The fugitive came home. The exile returned. The wrestler was laid to rest in the land of his fathers. So ended the life of Jacob, the heel-grabber who became Israel, the deceiver who wrestled with God, the father whose sons became the 12 tribes. He was not perfect. He was stubborn, flawed, afraid. He played favorites, repeated his parents' mistakes, and paid dearly for his deceptions. But he was chosen, and through all his failures, God's purpose prevailed. Jacob's limp became his legacy. His struggle became his name. His wrestling became his identity. And from his 12 sons came a nation that would carry God's promise through history. The ladder still connected heaven to earth. God was still faithful to the covenant, And nothing, not deception, not favoritism, not exile, not famine, not even death, could break what God had sworn. Jacob's story asks us a question that echoes through time. When God confronts you with your sin, your weakness, your brokenness, will you run or will you wrestle until He blesses you? God doesn't bless the perfect. He doesn't choose the spotless. He chooses wrestlers. He chooses the wounded. He chooses those who refuse to let go. And He makes them into Israel. When life breaks you, believe God. When circumstances crush you, believe God. When hope seems dead, believe God. Because the God of Jacob is still the God who keeps His promises. If this story impacted you, I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, so you don't miss the next story in this biblical series. Share this with someone who needs to hear that God uses imperfect people to accomplish His perfect plan. Thanks for watching. God bless you.